Single dad gave a lift to a woman with a torn dress, unaware she was the runaway bride of a millionaire. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The rain was relentless, turning the narrow mountain road into a ribbon of black water that reflected Logan's headlights like shattered glass. His windshield wipers were working overtime, and still he could barely see 10 ft ahead. He'd driven these back roads 1,000 times, usually listening to classic rock and thinking about what he'd make Dylan for dinner or whether he remembered to pay the electric bill on time. But tonight, something was different. His headlights caught movement, a figure stumbling along the shoulder, barely visible through the downpour. Logan threw his foot on the brake, his truck hydroplaning slightly before coming to a stop. He squinted through the rain-streaked windshield, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It was a woman walking. No, stumbling. And she was wearing what looked like, no, that couldn't be right, a wedding dress. Logan threw the truck into park and rolled down his window, rain immediately pelting his face. "Ma'am," he called out, having to shout over the storm. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" The woman stopped walking. She turned toward his voice slowly, as if moving through water. And that's when Logan saw her face, even through the darkness and rain, even with her makeup running in dark rivers down her cheeks. He could see the devastation in her eyes, the kind of pain that makes a person forget where they are, forget to care about things like hypothermia or cars speeding around blind curves. She was a larger woman, and the dress, which must have been stunning once, now clung to her like a ruined dream. She looked like a ghost, like someone who'd wandered out of their own life and couldn't find their way back. "Please," Logan said, softer now, but still loud enough to carry over the rain. "Whatever happened, you need to get out of this storm. You'll catch pneumonia or worse." The woman shook her head, but Logan couldn't tell if she was refusing help or just couldn't process what he was saying. Her lips were trembling. Whether from cold or crying, he couldn't be sure. "I'm not going to hurt you," Logan continued, keeping his voice as gentle as possible. "I'm just a dad trying to get home to a son, but I can't drive away and leave you out here. I won't, so please just get in the truck." Something in his voice must have broken through whatever fog she was in because she took a step toward the passenger door, then another. Logan reached across and pushed it open from the inside, and the woman climbed in with mechanical movements like her body was operating on autopilot while her mind was somewhere else entirely. She was shivering violently. Logan cranked the heat up as high as it would go and reached behind the seat, pulling out an old moving blanket he kept for hauling furniture. It smelled like sawdust and was probably covered in microscopic splinters, but it was dry and thick. "Here," he said, draping it over her shoulders. She clutched it with white-knuckled hands, still not speaking, still staring straight ahead at nothing. Logan put the truck back in drive and pulled carefully onto the road. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of rain hammering the roof and the woman's ragged breathing. He wanted to ask what happened, wanted to know if someone had heard her, if he needed to call the police or drive her to a hospital. But something told him that pushing for answers right now would only make things worse. "I'm Logan," he said after a few minutes, keeping his eyes on the treacherous road. "I live about 10 minutes from here. Not much, just a farmhouse, but it's warm and dry, and you look like you could use both of those things right now." The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. She tried again. "Avery." Her voice was barely a whisper, raw from crying. "My name is Avery." "Okay, Avery. We're going to get you somewhere safe, and then when you're ready, if you're ready, you can tell me what happened. But only when you're ready. No pressure." Avery closed her eyes, and a fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't make a sound, but her shoulders shook, and Logan felt something crack open in his chest. He'd seen grief before. He'd lived it. And whatever had happened to this woman, whatever had put her on that road in a torn wedding dress in the middle of a storm, it was the kind of grief that changes you. He just drove, letting the rain fill the silence, taking the curves slow and careful, and wondering what kind of person leaves a bride alone on a mountain road in the middle of a storm. When they pulled up to the farmhouse, Logan could see lights on in the living room window. Mrs. Caroline would still be there, probably watching one of her crime shows while Dylan finished his homework at the kitchen table. It was past 9, later than Logan usually worked, but the hardware store had been slammed with people preparing for the storm. "That's my neighbor's car," Logan explained, nodding toward the old sedan in the driveway. "Mrs. Caroline watches my son when I work late. She's harmless, I promise. A little bossy, but in the grandmotherly way." Avery nodded but didn't move to get out of the truck. Logan killed the engine and came around to her side, opening the door and offering his hand. She looked at it for a long moment before taking it, her fingers ice cold even through the blanket. The front door opened before they reached the porch, and Mrs. Caroline stood there, backlit by the warm glow of the house. She was 73, but moved like someone 20 years younger, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Logan Turner." "I was about to send out a search party," she started, but then her eyes landed on Avery, and her mouth snapped shut. For 3 full seconds, she just stared. Then her expression shifted into something fierce and maternal. "Lord have mercy. Get that girl inside right now." Mrs. Caroline ushered them in with the efficiency of someone who'd raised 6 children and fostered a dozen more. "Dylan, honey, stay in the kitchen for a minute," she called out, then immediately turned her attention to Avery. "Come on, sweetheart, let's get you upstairs and into something dry." "Dad," Dylan's voice carried from the kitchen, excited and oblivious. "Did you remember to get the he?" appeared in the doorway, an 8-year-old bundle of energy with Logan's brown hair, and stopped short when he saw Avery. "Whoa, why is there a princess in our house?" Despite everything, Avery let out a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob, maybe both. "This is Miss Avery," Logan said, crouching down to Dylan's level. "She had some car trouble in the storm, and she's going to stay with us tonight. Can you be a good host and make sure Bear doesn't get underfoot?" Bear was their aging golden retriever, currently wagging his tail enthusiastically at all the excitement. "Sure," Dylan said, already moving toward Avery with the fearless friendliness of children. "Do you like mac and cheese? Dad makes really good mac and cheese. And we have a spare room upstairs with the books nobody reads and the bed that squeaks." "Dylan," Logan said, a warning note in his voice. "What?" "It does squeak. You said so yourself." Mrs. Caroline was already herding Avery toward the stairs. "Don't you worry about explaining anything tonight, dear," she said firmly. "I've got some clothes upstairs that might fit. I keep them for my daughter when she visits, but Lord knows she never does anymore. Tomorrow's troubles can wait until tomorrow." Logan watched them disappear up the stairs. Mrs. Caroline's hand, gentle but firm on Avery's back, and felt Dylan tug on his sleeve. "Dad, is she okay? She looks really sad." Logan ran a hand through his wet hair, trying to figure out how to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. "She's had a really bad day, buddy. Probably the worst. So we're going to be extra kind and give her space, okay?" Dylan nodded seriously, his expression more mature than his years. He'd learned about bad days early after his mom died. He understood in the way children do that sometimes people needed gentleness. "We can share my rock collection with her tomorrow. Rocks always make people feel better." Logan pulled his son into a hug, grateful and heartbroken and proud all at once. "Yeah, buddy, I bet that would help." Upstairs, Mrs. Caroline was moving with practiced efficiency, pulling clothes from the closet in the spare room, while Avery stood dripping on the hardwood floor, still clutching the moving blanket. "Arms up, honey." And when Avery just stared at her blankly, she softened her voice. "Come on now, let's get you out of that dress before you freeze to death." Avery's hands moved to the zipper, but they were shaking too hard to grip it. Mrs. Caroline stepped in without a word, turning her around and working the zipper down with gentle hands. The dress fell away in pieces. First the top, then the skirt, until Avery was standing in just her slip and whatever was left of her dignity. Mrs. Caroline had seen a lot in her 70 decades. She'd raised children through scraped knees and broken hearts, fostered teenagers who'd been through hell and back, buried a husband and a son. She knew devastation when she saw it, and whatever happened to this girl, whatever had put her on that road in a wedding dress, it was the kind of thing that either broke you or rebuilt you. She handed Avery a towel and some warm clothes, sweatpants, and an oversized sweater, and turned her back to give her privacy. There's a bathroom right through that door. Hot shower, clean clothes, and then if you feel up to it, come downstairs. Logan makes a mean grilled cheese, and Dylan will talk your ear off about his rock collection if you let him. But if you'd rather stay up here and sleep, that's fine too. No judgment either way. Avery's voice came out cracked and small. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Mrs. Caroline turned around, her eyes sharp but kind. Honey, I don't need to know your story to know you need help. That's what decent people do. They help. Now go take that shower before you catch your death. 20 minutes later, Avery found herself sitting at Logan Turner's kitchen table, wrapped in clothes that smelled like lavender detergent, her hair wet and hanging loose around her shoulders. The kitchen was cluttered, but clean, with children's drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets and a dish rack full of mismatched plates. It was the opposite of everything Avery had known. The sprawling penthouse in Boston, the chef-prepared meals, the designer everything. It was perfect. Logan set a plate in front of her, grilled cheese cut into triangles, tomato soup still steaming, and Avery felt something crack inside her chest. It was such a simple gesture, so overwhelmingly kind, that she couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They came in great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Logan froze, panic flickering across his face, but Mrs. Caroline just squeezed Avery's shoulder and pulled up a chair beside her. Let it out, honey. Sometimes you need to look the poison drain before you can start healing. Dylan appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide. Is Miss Avery crying because she doesn't like grilled cheese? No, buddy, Logan said quickly. She's okay. Why don't you go get ready for bed and I'll come tuck you in a few minutes. Can Miss Avery tuck me in? Dylan asked, and Logan winced. Dylan, not tonight. It's okay, Avery said, her voice steadier than she felt. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and managed something that almost resembled a smile. I'd like that, if that's okay with your dad. Dylan beamed and grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the stairs, chattering about his stuffed animals and the loose tooth he'd been wiggling for weeks. Logan and Mrs. Caroline exchanged glances. That boy has a gift, Mrs. Caroline said quietly, foreseeing when people need to feel useful again. Logan nodded, watching Avery disappear up the stairs with his son. I just hope we're doing the right thing. I don't even know what happened to her. You will, Mrs. Caroline said, patting his arm. When she's ready, you will. And until then, you do what you've always done best, Logan Turner. You show up and you care and you make people feel safe. 6 hours earlier, Avery Douglas had been standing in the bridal suite of the Grand View Hotel in Boston, surrounded by 12 bridesmaids who barely bothered to whisper their comments anymore. I still can't believe they had to custom make the dress. I mean, surely she could have lost some weight before the wedding. Well, you know what they say, love is blind. Or, in Declan's case, love sees dollar signs. Avery had learned to tune it out. A 29 as the daughter of Jordan Douglas, owner of Sky Forge Industries. She'd spent her entire life being scrutinized. The tabloids had never been kind about her weight, and the society pages loved to compare her unfavorably to her willowy mother, who'd passed away from breast cancer when Avery was 15. But Declan Green had been different, or so she'd convinced herself. The CEO of Green Technologies had pursued her relentlessly for 2 years. He'd sent flowers to her office, taken her to quiet restaurants where they could actually talk, held her when she cried after particularly brutal social media comments. He'd told her she was beautiful, exactly as she was, that her size didn't matter, that he loved her intelligence and her kindness and her laugh. She'd almost believed him. Her cousin Hannah had burst into the bridal suite 20 minutes before the ceremony, her face pale, her phone clutched in her shaking hand. Avery, you need to hear this. I'm so sorry, but you need to hear this right now. The recording was from Declan's bachelor party 3 nights prior. His voice slurred with alcohol, but unmistakably, his filled the small space between them as Hannah held the phone up. Of course, I don't actually want to wake up next to that every morning. But Jordan Douglas's fortune and connections, that's worth playing pretend for a few years. Once I have control of enough shares through the marriage, I'll find some excuse to divorce her. Probably won't be hard. I'll just say she let herself go even more. The whale can barely fit in the dress as it is. But hey, suffering through it for Skyche, that's just smart business. His groomsmen had laughed. They'd actually laughed, making jokes about taking one for the team and the things men do for money. Avery had stood there in her custom-made wedding gown that cost more than most people's cars and felt every carefully constructed piece of her world shatter. Every "I love you," every tender moment, every promise, all of it had been a lie. A calculated performance by a man who saw her nothing more than a stepping stone to her father's empire. She dropped the phone, grabbed the front of her dress, and ran. She'd pushed past the makeup artist, the wedding coordinator calling after her, the confused guests starting to gather. She'd run through the lobby of the Grand View Hotel in her full wedding regalia out into the gray October afternoon, not stopping until she reached North Station. The ticketing agent had looked at her like she'd lost her mind, and maybe she had. But Avery had bought a ticket for the first train heading anywhere that wasn't Boston, Millbrook, Vermont. She'd never heard of it, had no idea where it was, and that made it perfect. The train ride had been a blur of tears and stares. A kind elderly woman had offered her a tissue. A businessman had asked if he needed him to call someone. Avery had declined everything, staring out the window as the city gave way to suburbs, then to the mountains and forests of Vermont. When she'd reached Millbrook's tiny station, she'd kept walking. The rain had started as a drizzle and built to a downpour, but Avery barely noticed. She'd walked the empty roads, letting the rain wash away her makeup and her last bit of hope, until her legs gave out, and she'd found herself stumbling along a mountain road in the dark, until Logan's headlights had found her. Upstairs, Dylan was showing Avery his prized possessions with the unself-conscious enthusiasm that only 8-year-olds possess. There was the lucky rock he'd found at the quarry, smooth and blue-gray. The shark tooth his Uncle Pete had brought back from Florida. The fossilized leaf Mrs. Caroline had helped him identify for his science project. And this one, Dylan said, holding up a piece of ordinary quartz. Dad said I found it the day my mom died. I didn't know she was going to die yet, but I found this rock, and it made me feel better. So now, whenever I'm sad, I hold it, and it reminds me that things can be beautiful even when they're broken. Avery felt her breath catch. Your mom? Dylan nodded matter-of-factly, climbing into bed. Dad says she was the best person ever. He says she had a disease that made her body attack itself, and the doctors couldn't fix it. Sometimes bodies just don't work right, even when we want them to. He looked up at Avery with those startling eyes. She realized and smiled. Are you sad because your body doesn't work right? No, Avery said softly, sitting on the edge of his bed. I'm sad because I thought someone loved me, but they didn't. Not really. Dylan considered this with the seriousness of a philosopher. Dad says people who don't know how to love are missing something important inside them, like if you forgot how to taste food or hear music. He says it's sad for them, but you can't fix it for them. They have to want to fix it themselves. Your dad sounds pretty smart. He is, Dylan agreed. He's not rich or anything, and sometimes he burns dinner, but he's the best dad ever. And Mrs. Caroline says he deserves to be happy again. He paused, then added with the bluntness of childhood, You should stay here. You're nice and you listen good. Plus, Dad's been lonely even though he doesn't say so. Avery felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they weren't entirely sad. I don't know how long I'm staying, Dylan. I'm kind of figuring things out. That's okay, Dylan said, snuggling under his blankets. Dad always says the best things are worth waiting for. Maybe you need to wait here for a while until you figure it out. Avery tucked him in, smoothing his brown hair back from his forehead, and felt something settle in her chest, something that felt almost like peace. The days turned into a week, and the week turned into 2. Avery stayed in the spare room that squeaked, wore Mrs. Caroline's daughter's clothes, and slowly started to remember what it felt like to breathe without the weight of expectations crushing her chest. She helped with Dylan after school, making snacks and reviewing math homework, and listening to detailed explanations about Minecraft that she only half understood. She took walks through Millbrook's trails, marveling at the autumn leaves and the quiet. She sat in Logan's kitchen while he cooked dinner, the two of them falling into an easy rhythm of conversation and comfortable silence. Logan never pushed. He'd offer an ear if she wanted to talk, but he never demanded explanations. It was so different from her father's well-meaning but constant interrogations about her feelings, from Declan's performative concern that she now recognized as manipulation. It was the second Friday of her stay when Avery finally told Logan everything. They were washing dishes side by side after dinner, Dylan already in bed, Mrs. Carolyn having gone home for the night. "Declan Green," Avery said quietly, her hands stilling in the soapy water. "That was his name. The man I was supposed to marry." Logan didn't look at her, just kept drying the plate in his hands. "Do you want to talk about it?" So she did. She told him about the recording, about the cruel laughter, about running through the hotel lobby in her wedding dress while 300 guests waited in the chapel. She told him about the tabloids and the weight comments and the way she'd convinced herself that Declan was different, that he saw past all of it. "He was using me," Avery said recordingly. "The whole time, 2 years of my life, and I was just a stepping stone to my father's company. Skyforge Industries, that's what he really wanted. The shares I'd bring to the marriage, access to the board. He said I was a whale. He said suffering through being married to me was just smart business." Logan sat down the dish towel slowly, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Some people never learned that the most valuable things in life can't be measured in dollars or pounds. He turned to face her, and Avery was struck with the gentle intensity in his eyes. "My wife, Claire, she was a kindergarten teacher, never made more than $30,000 a year. We lived paycheck to paycheck most of the time, especially after Dylan was born, and the medical bills started piling up from her treatments. But she was the richest person I ever knew. Rich in the ways that actually matter. Kindness, patience, joy. She could make Dylan laugh when he was crying. She could make me feel like the luckiest man alive, even when we were eating ramen for the 3rd night in a row." He stepped closer, not touching Avery, but close enough that she could see the sincerity in every line of his face. "Declan Green is a fool," Logan said quietly. "Not because he gave up wealth or connections, though your father must be a force to be reckoned with, but because he had you, and he didn't know what he had. That's the real tragedy. You showed up here broken, and you still managed to make my son happier than he's been in years. You reorganized my disaster of an inventory system at the store. You laugh at my terrible dad jokes. You're patient and kind and brilliant. And if Declan couldn't see that, then he's not just a fool. He's missing something essential that makes people human." Avery was crying again, but this time, the tears felt different. Cleansing, maybe. Or hopeful. "I don't know who I am without my father's name," she admitted. "Without Skyforge and the money and all of it. That's what Declan saw. That's what everyone sees. That's not what I see," Logan said simply. "I see Avery, who taught my son to play chopsticks on the piano, who reorganized my entire filing system using a color-coding method I still don't fully understand, but works perfectly, who eats burned grilled cheese without complaining and laughs when Bear steals socks. That's who you are. The rest is just noise." Avery reached out and took Logan's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, and felt something shift in her chest. Something that felt like the beginning of healing. Or maybe the beginning of something else entirely. As October turned into November, and November eased into December, Avery found herself transforming in ways that had nothing to do with her reflection in the mirror. Though she'd be lying if she said the regular walks through Millbrook's trails and the absence of stress eating hadn't changed her body somewhat. But the real transformation was deeper. She'd started helping at Millbrook Hardware during their busiest hours, and to her surprise, she loved it. Her business degree from Wharton, which had always felt like just another expectation to fulfill, suddenly became useful in practical, tangible ways. She redesigned Logan's chaotic inventory system, implemented a new point-of-sale software that cut checkout times in half, and even negotiated better terms with their suppliers. "You're wasted on small-town hardware," Logan said one afternoon, watching her finalize an order with the easy confidence of someone who'd been born for business. "You could run a Fortune 500 company." "I don't want to run a Fortune 500 company," Avery replied, surprised to realize it was true. "I want this, small enough to matter, big enough to help." Do you know Mrs. Patterson came in yesterday and told me the new shelf arrangement helped her find the exact screws she needed for her grandson's wheelchair ramp? That felt better than any quarterly earnings report I ever presented to my father's board. Logan was quiet for a moment, then smiled. That slow, genuine smile that made Avery's heart do complicated things in her chest. "Claire would have liked you," he said softly. "She always said the best kind of success was the kind that made other people's lives better." They'd started a tradition of Friday movie nights. The three of them piled on Logan's worn couch, Dylan in the middle, bears sprawled across everyone's feet. They'd watch The Princess Bride and E.T. and The Goonies, Dylan providing running commentary on everything. Avery would catch Logan watching her instead of the screen. Sometimes, his expression unguarded, and she'd feel heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with embarrassment. December brought snow, and with it, a kind of magic Avery had forgotten existed. Dylan taught her how to make snow angels properly, and they'd built a snowman family in the front yard. Dad, Kid, and Miss Avery, each one slightly lopsided and perfect. Mrs. Caroline had brought over her famous hot chocolate recipe, and they'd spent evenings in the kitchen, windows steamed up, the house smelling like cinnamon and contentment. Avery and Logan had fallen into something that felt inevitable, natural as breathing. Their hands would brush when passing dishes. Their conversations would stretch late into the night after Dylan was asleep, covering everything from childhood dreams to fears they'd never spoken aloud. Once, when a particularly fierce snowstorm had knocked out the power, they'd sat by the fireplace, and Logan had pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders, and Avery had felt safer than she'd ever felt in her father's fortress-like penthouse. But they hadn't kissed, hadn't crossed that final line. It was as if both of them were waiting for something. For Avery to be sure she was choosing this life, not just running from her old one. For Logan to be certain he wasn't taking advantage of someone in crisis. The unspoken tension was simultaneously frustrating and sweet. Christmas approached, and Dylan's excitement reached fever pitch. He'd insisted on getting a real tree from the lot in town, and the three of them had spent an entire Saturday decorating it with mismatched ornaments that told the story of Logan and Dylan's life. Handmade ones from Dylan's preschool years, fancy blown glass ones that had belonged to Claire, and now new ones that Avery had picked up from the hardware store's holiday display. "This is the best Christmas ever," Dylan announced, hanging a glittery reindeer on a lower branch. "Because you're here, Miss Avery." "I'm glad I'm here too," Avery said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. That night, after Dylan had finally crashed from excitement and sugar, Avery sat at the kitchen table with Logan's laptop, staring at the screen. She'd been avoiding it for weeks, but she couldn't hide forever. With shaking fingers, she typed her own name into a search engine. The results were overwhelming. Articles from the Boston Globe, the Society pages, gossip blogs, runaway bride disappears. Douglas heiress vanishes hours before Society wedding. Declan Green speaks out. "I'm devastated by Avery's disappearance. Friends concerned for Avery Douglas's mental health after shocking wedding day flee." Avery felt sick reading Declan's fabricated concern. His carefully crafted image of the abandoned groom who just wanted his bride back safely. There were quotes from bridesmaids expressing worry that were thinly veiled judgment. Her father's no comment that somehow spoke volumes about his disappointment. "Hey." Logan's voice was soft as he appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" Avery closed the laptop quickly, but not quickly enough. Logan had seen. He pulled out a chair and sat beside her, not touching, but close. "You don't owe them anything. Not explanations, not apologies. Nothing." "My father must be humiliated," Avery said quietly. "All those guests, all that money spent, and I ran." "Your father loves you," Logan said firmly. "Trust me on this. Maybe he's disappointed things didn't turn out how he planned, but if he knew what Declan said, he doesn't know." Avery interrupted. "Hannah has the recording, but I couldn't face telling him. He was so happy about the wedding. Declan was everything he thought I needed. Successful, ambitious, from the right family. If I tell him why I ran, he'll blame himself for pushing me toward Declan." Logan was quiet for a long moment. Maybe, he said finally, your father deserves to know the truth, not to punish him, but to free both of you from whatever false stories being told out there. Avery looked at him. This man who'd saved her without knowing her, who'd given her space to heal without asking for anything in return, who'd let her into his life and his son's heart with a generosity that still took her breath away. I'm scared, Avery admitted, of facing them, of going back to that world, of losing this. Logan took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and steady. You're not going to lose this. This isn't going anywhere. But you also can't hide forever, Avery. Eventually, you're going to have to decide. Are you running away from something or running towards something? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. 4 months after that rainy October night, well after Christmas had passed and January had settled into its quiet rhythm, Avery's phone, the one she got with Logan, pinged with an email notification. She was sitting at Logan's kitchen table reviewing inventory reports for the hardware store when she saw the sender's name. Jordan Douglas, her father. Her hand hovered over the trackpad, heart hammering. She'd ignored his previous attempts to reach out, the calls to her old phone number, the messages through her assistant, even the private investigators she'd spotted parked down the street 3 weeks ago, and then never saw again. She'd assumed her father had given up. With trembling fingers, she opened the email. My dearest Avery, I have known where you were for 4 months now. Private investigators are quite thorough when money is no object. Before you panic, please know that I have told no one. Not the media, not Declan, not even my own board of directors who keep asking uncomfortable questions about your whereabouts. I know about the recording. Hannah finally played it for me after Christmas, once she was certain you were safe. I listened to that boy, and he is a boy despite his degrees, and his company talk about my daughter, about my brilliant, kind, beautiful daughter, and I wanted to destroy him. I very nearly did, but then I realized you already had by running, by choosing yourself. Avery, I was a fool. I pushed you toward Declan because I thought security meant money and status. I forgot the most important lesson your mother ever taught me, that she chose me when I had nothing but ambition and callous hands, when I was nobody. And she made me into someone by believing in me. Real security comes from being loved for who you are, not what you're worth. I've done my research on Logan Turner. Widowed father works at a hardware store, drives a 15-year-old truck, has approximately $3,200 in his savings account, and a mortgage he'll be paying off for another 22 years. On paper, he's everything I should worry about. In reality, I've never seen you happier. The investigators sent photos and Avery, you're glowing. You're laughing. You're whole in a way you never were with Declan. I'm not asking you to come home. I'm asking for your forgiveness. And perhaps someday the chance to meet the family you found. The boy Dylan looks like he could use a grandfather who knows how to properly spoil a grandchild. And Logan, well, I'd like to shake the hand of the man who stopped on a dark road and saved my daughter when I couldn't. Declan Green is facing federal investigation for corporate espionage and securities fraud. It seems he planned to steal more than just your heart and my company shares. I've made certain he'll never bother you again. The truth about why you left has been carefully managed. You're safe. You were always safe. But now it's official. I love you. I have always loved you. I'm sorry I didn't show you that in the ways that mattered. Your loving and foolish father, Jordan Douglas. P.S. If you're worried about money, don't be. Your trust fund has been growing nicely, and it's yours, regardless of who you marry or don't marry. Your mother made sure of that. She was smarter than both of us. Avery read the email 3 times, tears streaming down her face before she heard Logan's truck pull into the driveway. She met him at the door, phone in hand, unable to speak through the sobs that were part grief, part relief, part joy. Logan took one look at her and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she shook. What happened? Are you okay? Is someone hurt? Read it, Avery managed, thrusting the phone at him. Logan read, his expression shifting from concern to surprise to something softer. When he finished, he looked at Avery with those warm brown eyes that had become her anchor. What do you want to do? He asked simply. Avery took a shaky breath, wiping her eyes. I want to stay here with you, with Dylan. This you, this life, this town. It's more real than anything I've ever known. But I want my father to know I forgive him. I want him to meet you, to meet Dylan. I want both parts of my life, the before and the after, to somehow exist together. Logan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Then that's what we'll do. We'll figure it out together. And then finally, he kissed her. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It was certain and sure. The kiss of a man who'd been waiting to be sure this was right, that she was choosing him and not just escaping something else. Avery kissed him back with everything in her, all the fear and healing and hope and love that had been building for 4 months. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Logan rested his forehead against hers. "Dad!" Dylan's voice came from upstairs, groggy with sleep. "Is Miss Avery crying again? Should I bring my rock collection?" They both laughed, and Logan called up. "No rocks needed, buddy. Everything's good. Everything's really good." "Finally," Dylan yelled back. "I told Mrs. Caroline you guys would figure it out eventually." Logan and Avery looked at each other and started laughing harder. And somewhere in that laughter was the sound of futures being built, of families being formed, of love that had grown slowly and surely from the darkest moment into something lasting. 1 year and 6 months after that rainy October night, Millbrook's small community church was filled with an eclectic mix of people, local townspeople who'd adopted Avery as one of their own, business associates of Jordan Douglas who'd flown in from Boston and New York, Mrs. Caroline's extended family, and even some of Dylan's classmates who were mostly there for the cake. Avery stood in the church's small preparation room, looking at herself in the full-length mirror. Her dress was simple, a cream sundress from Eleanor's boutique on Main Street, fitted but comfortable with flowers from Mrs. Caroline's garden woven into her loose curls. No elaborate updo, no custom designer gown, no makeup artist or team of bridesmaids whispering behind her back. Just her, exactly as she was about to marry a man who loved her for exactly that. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Jordan Douglas said from the doorway. He'd aged in the past 18 months, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but he looked lighter somehow, happier. He and Logan had hit it off immediately when Jordan had visited 3 months after that email, bonding over their mutual love of classic cars and their shared devotion to Avery and Dylan. "Daddy?" Avery said, turning to him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for understanding, for being here." Jordan crossed the room and took his daughter's hands. "Thank you for letting me be here and for teaching this old fool that success isn't measured in quarterly reports." He smiled, his own eyes wet. "Your mother would be so proud of you. She always said you'd find your own path, that you were too smart and too stubborn to follow anyone else's plan." As usual, she was right. The opening notes of the processional began, and Jordan offered his arm. "Ready to go find your path?" Avery took his arm, her heart full to bursting. "I already found it. Now I'm just making it official." They walked down the aisle together, past Mrs. Caroline dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, past Logan's employees from the hardware store, past Skyforge Industries executives awkwardly squeezed into the small church pews. Dylan stood at the front in his miniature suit, grinning from ear to ear, his pocket bulging with what Avery suspected was his lucky rock. And there was Logan, looking overwhelmed and happy and handsome in his simple suit, his eyes locked on her like she was the only person in the universe. When Jordan placed Avery's hand in Logan's, he leaned close and whispered, "You take care of her, or I'll use my considerable resources in creative and terrifying ways." Logan grinned. "Yes, sir." "Good man," Jordan said, then louder. "She's been mine for 29 years. She's yours now. Don't screw it up." The whole church laughed, and Avery rolled her eyes affectionately. Some things never changed. The ceremony was simple and perfect. They'd written their own vows. Logan promising to always see her, really see her, and to never run out of terrible dad jokes. Avery promising to help him organize his life and to love his son as fiercely as if he were her own. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Logan kissed her with the easy confidence of someone who'd been doing it for months, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was held in the hardware store's cleared-out garden center, transformed with string lights and wild flowers into something magical. Jordan had offered to rent out the fanciest venue in Vermont, but Avery and Logan had declined. This was their place, their community, their life. It seemed fitting to celebrate it here. Dylan took his role as ring-bearer very seriously, but his role as master of ceremonies even more so. When it came time for toasts, he climbed upon a chair, tapping his plastic cup of sparkling cider with a spoon until everyone quieted down. "I'm Dylan," he announced unnecessarily. Everyone there knew him. "And I want to say something about my dad and my new mom." Avery felt her throat tighten at the casual way he said mom. They had talked about what he wanted to call her, and he decided on mom with a capital M because you're not my first mom, but you're my real mom now. And that's different, but good. My dad was sad for a really long time. He didn't think I knew, but I did. He smiled, and he made jokes, and he was the best dad ever, but he was sad inside. And then Miss Avery, Mom, came to our house in a really wet dress, and she was sad too. But they were sad together, and then they started being happy together, and now we're all happy. So I think that's pretty cool. He paused, considering, then added, "Also, she taught me to play piano, and she doesn't burn dinner as much as Dad does, and she lets me have extra cookies sometimes, so that's also good." The crowd laughed and Logan pulled Avery close, kissing the top of her head while people raised their glasses to Dylan's toast. Mrs. Caroline went next, telling embarrassing stories about Logan as a younger man. Jordan gave a speech that was surprisingly emotional about second chances and finding wisdom in unexpected places. Even some of Logan's employees from the hardware store shared memories of Avery's first days working there when she tried to help a customer find PVC pipe and had accidentally directed them to the plumbing section instead of the plastic section, then spent 20 minutes learning the difference so she'd never make that mistake again. As the evening wore on and the dancing began, Jordan Douglas Gamey, attempting to learn line dancing from Mrs. Caroline Dillon, running circles with his classmates. The whole unlikely gathering of old money and small-town folk, finding common ground in celebration. Logan pulled Avery aside. They stood just outside the garden center, looking up at the stars visible beyond Millbrook's minimal light pollution. "Any regrets?" Logan asked softly. Avery thought about the Grand View Hotel, about the recording that had shattered her world, about Declan Green, who was now facing federal charges and had become irrelevant to her life. She thought about the girl who'd run through the rain in a torn wedding dress, convinced she'd never trust again. "Not a single one," she said, lacing her fingers through Logan's. "That was the worst day of my life, but it led me here to you, to Dylan, to this life that's small and beautiful and real. So, no, I don't regret any of it." Logan pulled her close, and they swayed gently to the music drifting from inside. "You know, when I saw you on that road, I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I didn't know I was meeting my future wife, and I thought my life was over." Avery replied, "I didn't know it was just beginning." Inside, Dylan's laughter rang out, followed by Jordan's deep chuckle as Mrs. Caroline apparently taught him the wrong dance steps on purpose. The string lights twinkled overhead, and the autumn air carried the scent of apple cider and possibility. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is actually the beginning of your greatest blessing. Sometimes the person who saves you is the one who needs saving just as much. And sometimes love finds you when you're soaking wet, devastated, and convinced you'll never trust again. But you do, because the right person makes trust feel as natural as breathing. Christopher Ashford's name never came up. He'd become what he deserved to be, irrelevant. A footnote in a story that had found its true beginning on a rain-soaked Vermont road. A cautionary tale about measuring worth in all the wrong ways. But this story, Logan and Avery and Dylan's story, was just beginning. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to remember that sometimes we find home in the most unexpected places. And subscribe to Everbell's Stories for more tales that remind us all the most valuable things in life can't be measured in dollars, only in moments like these.